So you reread your sources, you found a snag, you asked a great analytical question, you answered it, you took the thesis test, you passed with flying colors. Congratulations! Just kidding, you have no idea what I just said. You're staring at a blank computer screen at 1 a.m. and you're contemplating the existential void. My name is Lusia Zaitseva and I teach writing at Harvard University. I'm also the founder of IvyWrite. And in today's video, I'm going to talk about how you go from that hard-won nugget of insight we call a thesis to a fully formed, dare I say, majestic oak. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, go watch the first few videos of this series and then come back here. I'll leave a link in the description. Now that we're on the same page, you know what I'm not going to do is talk about how to take a boring thesis with 3 parts, slap on an intro and a conclusion, and be done with it. Because no one cares about that. Not your mom, not your grandma, least of all your cat. But if there's one thing the 5-paragraph essay has going for it, it's that it teaches us to set expectations for our reader and then actually live up to those expectations. If you say you're going to talk about A, B, and then C, we're going to be pretty confused if you actually do it in a different order. So how do we take that important principle, which is called parallel construction, and apply it to a sophisticated thesis that isn't something your cat could write? Here's a genuinely good, interesting thesis taken from a research paper by one of my students. She came up with this by following the exact steps that I lay out in videos 2 through 4 because she's awesome. Here's what she came up with. The privatization of youth sports into club teams, private training, and even sports academies has changed the way children interact with athletics. This pay-to-play model of youth sports has many benefits for those who can afford it, but it's leaving less well-off children behind. That's a doozy of a thesis, and how would you even know where to start unpacking that into logically related paragraphs that build on each other? Well, if you like puzzles, you're going to really like this, because decoding a sophisticated thesis is kind of like solving one big 3-dimensional puzzle.
Sorry, Danny, I'm going to have to give you the full tour some other time.
First, let's note that this thesis generally states a problem, and at a high enough level of abstraction, basically every thesis does this, no matter what the discipline, because an argument always stems from a snag, and a snag is basically a tension that calls out to us for resolution. So even if you think that you're writing a very different kind of essay than this, still come along, because the steps we're about to go through apply to any piece of expository writing, and I'm about to give you the keys to the kingdom. You're welcome. In this case, the student is arguing that youth sports participation is getting more and more expensive in the United States, and related problem number 2, as a result, less well-off children are having a harder time participating in those sports. Because of parallel construction, we know that the author is going to talk about these 2 problems in that order, and if they're really nice, they might even tell us something about a solution, because otherwise that'd be kind of like a plumber showing up to your house and saying, "Whoa, that's a pretty intense leak you got there." So now we've got a broad roadmap from this thesis about what the body paragraphs will contain. The author will tell us about the pay-to-pay problem, tell us who it's disproportionately affecting, and then offer something by way of a solution. And we know it has to be in that order because without A first, we wouldn't have the context necessary to appreciate B, and obviously you're not going to talk about the solution before you talk about the problem. Great, now let's dig a little deeper. If we zoom in on the first part of the thesis, we'll see that there are actually 3 steps the author needs to take to establish the pay-to-pay problem, probably in this order. They need to tell us about the importance of youth sports, just so we can establish right off the bat that probably all children, regardless of class, should be given access. Then give us the facts about how expensive playing sports has gotten, and establish that's truly something new by telling us comparatively what things used to cost. And once we do that, then the next logical step would be to try to explain how or why this shift came about, right? In other words, you first want to establish that something has changed, and then you want to tell us why. If you said something like, "I have less time on the weekends than I used to," you'd leave us hanging if you didn't tell us why. And you also wouldn't say, "Because my pet armadillo has a busy feeding schedule," before you told us, "I have less time on the weekends than I used to." So now we have 4 steps. Tell us about the importance of youth sports, give us the facts about how expensive playing sports has gotten, establish that's truly something new by telling us comparatively what things used to cost, tell us why things have changed. You'll also notice that we're not rushing right out the gate to get to our whole thesis in its entirety, because that would be doing too much too soon. Instead, we're carefully and patiently constructing the foundation of our argument so that we can build it up story by story. And once she's taken these steps that we've just unpacked together, you'd probably expect the author to tell us who's missing out on these important opportunities that have gotten more and more expensive. That brings us to the second of the 3 big picture moves we're expecting this essay to take. The author is going to tell us about the demographic most impacted by these soaring costs. And because it's good to be specific, she's going to do it through the lens of a sport she knows well, lacrosse. By homing in on this one particular sport, which my student knew well, she was able to speak with authority about how inaccessible her sport had become. And because we'd been primed from the get-go to know how important youth sports participation is to young people, we're extra stung by the fact that many of them are not able to take advantage of this opportunity. That's another way of saying that her argument has stakes, even if lacrosse makes about as much sense to you as...
And there goes. A little wide, but very nice for the 2 elders over, Bob.
And that brings us to our third and final move. Remember that if a plumber came over to your house to fix a leaky pipe and instead marveled at your waterlogged sneaker collection, he wouldn't be a very good plumber. So at this point, it would be a pretty good place in the essay for the author to tell us about one initiative that she learned about that's trying to solve this equity problem in lacrosse, and maybe she'll even venture a guess about what could be applied from that effort to other sports. And that's it. All we have left to do is write a conclusion. And we got there from a 1-sentence thesis to 6 purposeful body paragraphs that all build on each other in a super logical way. Plus, we did all of this without a boring laundry list thesis, and instead we're building a coherent logical argument 1 paragraph at a time. It's kind of like the difference between 6 independent gears all turning separately and 1 gear turning a slightly bigger gear, turning a slightly bigger gear, turning the biggest gear of all, which is the culmination of your argument. Keep in mind, though, that it's kind of hard to game this all out from a bird's eye view in advance. There's sort of no substitute for getting into the weeds with your given piece of writing and shifting things around and seeing what works well and what doesn't. We're nearing the end of the video, and you might well be thinking to yourself, okay, Dr. Harvard PhD person, you made that look really easy, but I wouldn't even know where to start. And to you I say, I feel your pain, because as you've seen, building up a complex argument like this is really like solving a giant 3-dimensional puzzle. And if you're not struggling with it at some point, you're probably not thinking very hard. But there's hope. Once you've got your good arguable thesis, don't worry right away about figuring out the exact sequence of steps you're going to need to take in order to prove it. Instead, think about it like a picture coming slowly into focus, and trust that you'll figure out the details as you get down to writing and also, of course, revising. Start with a to-do list of tasks that you know you'll have to accomplish in order to support your thesis. I think that's less intimidating than trying to game out the perfect order from the get-go, because once you've got that list, you can always shuffle things around. Next time you're writing an essay, try breaking your thesis down in the way that we've just done, and let me know how it went in the comment section. And if you're a teacher, I'm really curious to hear how you help your own students think through the roadmap of a sophisticated thesis. Next week, we'll zoom out from thesis and think about how an introduction, too, is a really important part of your roadmap for the essay, as well as what makes a good introduction at the college level. If you found this video helpful, please like the video and subscribe to the channel, and also spread the word to friends you think will find it helpful. See you next time.